Okay, welcome to this very first tutorial on how to draw a map. Please forgive me if I get it wrong. So I use Photoshop. It's a very simple program in terms of art creation. He lied glibly, but it's a choice tool. Now, the first thing you have to do if you're going to create a new map is decide whether you're going to print it out or not. And by print it out, I mean whether you're going to print it out large scale or not. Are you going to make it something that you can hang on the wall, or are you going to make it a handout? If you're going to make it a handout, you can select the preset. I use international paper. An A4 should be more than sufficient. If you want to make it bigger, you can make it an A3, which most printers will handle if you've got a bigger printer tray. So let's go ahead and make an A3 map. This is the thing that pops up, obviously, and we're going to go over to our layers and we're going to make a new layer. I'm not going to do the tutorial on where buttons are, unfortunately, because you can use the principles applied here to any of your programs, whether they are Photoshop or GIMP or whatever it is that you're using. So the very first thing that I like to do is to lay out roughly my continent. So I'm going to grab a brush tool here and just very quickly kind of sketch out. Let's do a northern continent up there. Let us have a couple little islands down here. Then let's have the enemy continent here because we like that idea, and because we want them to be a divided nation, let's divide it along a rather large trench because that could give us something interesting. And maybe we have something else there, and let's put in a large lake or inland sea there. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so that's a rough layout of My Little Pony, apparently. Anyway, so we have our layout. We create another layer. I love working with layers because it allows us to do amazing stuff. Now, we're going to go to each continent, and I'm just going to zoom in really quickly here. We are at 50%. I need to go all the way up to 100%. Now, I've already got my mark here, so I'm going to go to my brush tool, make my brush size, say, 2, and my opacity 100%, so it's nice and dark. And now I start drawing coastline. Just very roughly. I don't have a fancy tablet. I'm using a mouse, and I'll show you how to solve those horrid little square things. I'm going to make a bay here because I think that could be quite cool, and it gives me an option to put some cities down. And I'm going to carry on going this way. Let's do that. I'm going to come down here and let's do some rather jagged edges. Maybe there was a big battle here or something. And so we're going to come over here, carry on with that. This is an interesting sort of wedge of land. So let's make it like the fingers of some kind of evil creature reaching out to take a prized kind of possession. So maybe the land is called the Peninsula of the Dark Hand or something. I'm just going to make another bay here because those choke points will always become sites of battles, because obviously it's easier to invade via land than it is to invade by sea. And we're just going to finish this off here quickly. And I'm going to come down. Let's just add in a little island here, and we'll put in another little island there. And this is still very kind of rough, and you'll see the cleanup process coming in a bit later. Usually I listen to some kind of music while I'm doing this, but I'm constantly coming back to what's the story. So I look at that funny little shape there, and I'm really just kind of letting my hand go wherever it needs to. I'm not really focused too much on creative geography. Maybe that's a problem. Maybe it isn't, I don't know. I want to open up this a little bit. I'll tell you why now. But I'm always looking at it going, okay, this funny thing here, what are we going to do with it? Is there going to be a castle in the middle there that's very defensible because you're going to approach it from one side? You know, what are we going to do? So here I wanted to break up the big continent with little islands. Maybe this is more of a swamp than an actual bay that's got big kind of land masses in it. And again, I'm not really too focused on the shapes I'm making, because you'll see we're going to come back just now and fix up each one. This is quite a process. A map can take, if you're doing a big scale map and you are crazy like me, it can take you upwards of 8 or 9 or 10 hours just sitting here kind of fiddling around and cleaning up lines and that kind of thing. In this tutorial we don't have 4 days worth of viewership time. I won't subject you to that, but I will finish this one continent with you and we can see what we can see. Oh, we've got 2 bays right next to each other. That's interesting. Okay, so that gives us roughly a continent. If we hide the grey shape, there we see our very strange kind of looking map, but it could grow on us. We could develop it. Let's not be too judgmental. So you would do this for the rest of the map. What already is kind of exciting me in terms of story is, what if this continent kind of had a similar kind of shape? And now I'm just going to do that for purposes. And what if we kind of carried on these shapes? Now I know that I'm creating this map for fantasy, and all you guys out there playing Star Wars and Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica or your own fantasy science fiction setting are sitting here going, yeah, but I don't draw this map for space. I do have maps that I have created for space, and if you really want, I can show you how to work those maps. It's a little bit different from this one, but the idea is still the same. You ask yourself, what is the story? So I'm looking at this rather interesting, rather crazy collection of islands, and I am not thinking that the players travel through this land by sea. I'm thinking that there are bridges connecting each of these islands together, and their cities on the bridges maybe rather than on the islands, or their cities on the islands and the bridges are swing bridges or rope bridges. Some of them may be stone bridges, but that for me creates rather an interesting potential story setting. The land of bridges, swingway, or God, that's terrible, causeway lost, or I don't know. We'll get to naming later. Naming is a fun and frustrating process at the same time. So anyway, let's move on. Now that we have created the basic outline for the continent, we can go ahead and hide our outline because we don't need it anymore, our basic idea. This looks like a really interesting place to begin with, and I really have no plan here. I am literally just talking my way through it. New layer. What I start with usually is mountain ranges. And mountain ranges come in 2 types, generally speaking. If you look at Earth as an example, you have mountain ranges that go horizontally, such as the Swiss Alps or the Himalayas, and you have mountain ranges that go vertically, such as the Rockies, the Andes, and so they don't often kind of run in vertical and horizontal lines at the same time. And there's a reason for that. It's plate tectonics, and as continents collide and subside and all that kind of wonderful stuff, the mountains are formed. We're in a fantasy setting, so we don't really need to care about that. However, from a narrative perspective, if we go back to that whole idea of world building, mountains become a great barrier. They become a great story point in terms of navigation. How do you get from one side of the continent to the other side of the continent if there's a giant mountain range in the middle? It's a good question. It's a potential for a whole bunch of adventures where the players have to navigate through the mountains. So your mountain ranges should become story points. You should look at it and go, okay, cool. We want to put mountains here, there, and everywhere. And mountains usually take up the most space on a map, aside from deserts and plains, but they are perhaps the most visual cue of a map in terms of potential story. So we've got lots of bridges that are going to be happening here because I really kind of like that idea with this little island thing here. So I don't want the players to really have encountered great heights, great treacherous pathways and that kind of thing in the immediate area here. I want the bridges hanging over the raw ocean to be terrifying. I want the pathways that are narrow and that span from one island to the other to be the terrifying factor. So I don't want any mountains here whatsoever. So if I come further north though, we've got this little isthmus thing here which is happening, which is kind of cool. I think we need a mountain range maybe here-ish so we can have this great big mountain range arcing forward. And again, all I do is I go in. Now this is where I'm at 200% here. This is where we get the insane people and we get the sane people, and you need to decide which one you are. I am definitely insane. I am going to draw my mountains by hand, and I am not going to use copy and paste or anything like that. I am literally just drawing V shapes, making some lines, and mountains don't really look like this. Mountains are long, continuous affairs with a few peaks here and there, but this is enough to give you a representation. And mountains, traditionally, they have high points in the middle, and then they kind of have hills and things around them. So that's usually how I draw my mountains. So I'm going to just spend the rest of my life here, quickly just jotting in some mountains. Let's put a cave in this one, because that could be quite fun. What's in the cave? Send the players there and have fun. Who knows? Who knows what's in the cave? So this is a fairly lengthy process, but it can be very, very rewarding. I'm not going to show you me drawing 50,000 mountains because it's not that exciting. However, you did ask to see a tutorial on how to make mountain maps, and this is the bare truth of it. It can take time. So we do this, and here's where you should be listening to some really cool music. You should be plotting out your adventures perhaps, or just looking at these mountains going, well, who lives in these mountains? Why are these mountain ranges here? What do they represent? Who lives on the one side? Who lives on the other? Are these dwarf-infested mountains? That could be pretty cool, actually. And you can really draw just kind of whatever you like. There's no rule on how these things should look. Or if you make a mistake, you can, of course, press Control-Z and undo it. Got a bit of a funny thing happening there. And so we would just carry on and carry on and carry on. Right. And if we zoom out every now and again just to see where we are, we're like, oh, okay, we're cool, we're halfway across the continent. Do we want to have a couple passes maybe? Let's leave those for the players to discover, or whatever the case might be. All right, so I will do the miracle of magical editing and just finish off these mountain ranges quickly, and you'll see what happens once we're done.